Hey, welcome back to the Gotham and Beyond podcast. My name is Vince. Hopefully you're doing well out there. I know I am. Today I'm going to be looking at another module. And yes, I'm going to be looking at a lot of modules in the future because a lot of people actually asked for those things. And I like to fulfill what people ask. So today we're looking at King of Crime. I think it has a lot going for it. It feels busy in kind of a good way. It feels comic book mean. It feels like the kind of adventure where the city is already in trouble before the heroes even get their bearings, and that's kind of interesting, and that matters. A lot of modules have decent villains, rosters, or a fun cover, but once you get inside, things start to flatten out and don't make sense sometimes. The setup takes too long, the threat feels disconnected, or the whole thing just becomes one fight after another with very little sense of momentum, and other ones do really well. But King of Crime does not really have that problem. It opens with Central City in a mess. The Flash is missing, the rogues are loose, the mayor is under pressure, the secret society of supervillains is back, and not in some quiet way either. They are out there committing crimes, stirring panic, and making the whole city feel like it's slipping out of control. That is a strong start for an adventure. It gives the heroes a reason to get moving really quickly and gives the GM a city that already feels alive under the stress. That is one of the first things I like about this module. It starts with pressure. Not lore, not 10 pages of slow warm-up or reading. It starts with pressure. And for a superhero game, that is exactly what you really need. Now, the other thing that hit me pretty quick is the villain lineup. This is not some random pile of second string troublemakers, and you have like villains like Goldface running the show, Mirror Master is involved, Captain Cold, Pied Piper, Matter Master, let's see here, Killer Moth, Shadow Thief, Cheetah, and all in the mix. That's a really good spread of villains, don't you think? It gives the adventure a variety right out of the gate. You do not get the same kind of scene over and over in this thing. One villain gives you cold and area control, another gives you sound disruption, another gives you weird dimension trouble, another gives you straight up animal danger, and then the other one gives you flashy criminal mastermind energy. So even before you get into how the adventure is structured, the cast is already doing a lot of the work for you when it comes to being a GM. And I do think that is important because a villain team module can fall apart if everybody feels interchangeable. Here they really don't. I mean, there are different problems, different moods, different kinds of scenes going on. That helps a lot. Now, one of the smartest things in King of Crime is the structure itself. The book is basically built like a rising wave of trouble happening. The heroes get pulled in and they start investigating. Then they hit a sequence of crimes. Captain Cold, Pied Piper, Master Killer, Then the stakes rise again with Goldface making the ultimatum, the bomb threat at the plaza, Mirror Master coming back into the picture, and finally the showdown with the secret society itself. Now, that's some pretty good pacing going on. It feels like, I don't know, a Golden Age comic era thing going on. Who knows? Every crime gives you another push forward. Every new scene says the city is getting worse and worse, and the villains are getting bolder and bolder. And the heroes are still just trying to play catch up the whole entire time. That is probably the module's biggest strength, I have to say, overall. It moves, it keeps moving, and I have to say, I really like that this module is openly trying to be replayable in a sense. That is not something you always get from older modules. A lot of them are just like one and done, or maybe you can get a second out of it, depending on the group and how long the time span goes by. The whole Fortnite 7 section, where the computer helps point towards possible villain connections and likely crimes, is kind of, I don't know, charming, sure, but is also generally a useful piece of design, to be honest. The adventure wants the GM to mix things up. It wants the same basic setup to play differently from run to run. That is the real strength, because if you own this module, you want it to feel like you can get more than one good night out of it, and this module definitely will. King of Crime seems to understand that when it was written. And honestly, that makes it easier to talk about today too. Even if you're not running the exact same heroes the module expects, the structure still works. It's still a city under coordinated attack, a villain society testing public defenses, public panic on the rise. The heroes have to stop series of criminals before the mastermind locks things down and takes control. That idea still works. It works very well, actually. You could run this for Flash-type heroes, sure. But you can also run for custom heroes without too much pain, and that's what I like. You just need the city, a crisis, and a team willing to get bounced from threat to threat while trying to figure out a bigger plan. That is portable. More portable than some people might think. Now, do not want to oversell it, because this is still an older superhero module. And reading it, you really can feel that. Some of the scenes are pretty direct. Some of the clue flow depends on the players moving where the module wants them to move. So it's got a little tiny bit of railroading going on. It's definitely not a sandboxy type module. And it's not trying to be one either. This is definitely a plotted comic book ride. If your group likes to smash the rails and go completely sideways from the train tracks, you may need to do some work to loosen things up a bit, but it's not really a fatal flaw here. In fact, a lot of groups is probably a benefit. The adventure knows what it wants to be. It wants to put the heroes under pressure, move them through the string of sharp encounters, and end with a big villain gathering that feels worth the trouble. That is, I would say, a solid promise for a module to make. And from what I see here, it mostly keeps that promise for the most part. I also want to point out that something that helped me warm up to it even more, the book does not just throw scenes at you as a GM and walk away and says good luck. It has troubleshooting notes and presentation notes. It has alternate ways of handling things like note options, radio updates, things like that. It even has some maps. It has support. That matters more than people sometimes have to admit. A good module is not just a list of events. It is a GM tool. King of Crime actually tries to be that. So when I look at this as a review topic for this podcast, I think it is a strong one. There's enough here to talk about. This is a good setup. The villain lineup is good. The pacing is good. The replay angle is interesting. And the whole thing has a slightly rough, old school comic energy that makes it easy to forgive some of the more guided railroady parts. If I had to put it simply, I would say King of Crime feels like a module that wants to entertain the table first. And that is a compliment. I'm definitely going to say that's a compliment. It's not trying to be clever from a distance. It wants costume crime, public danger, weird villain teamwork, and heroes sprinting from one mess to the next. That is what superhero gaming is all about. So where do I land on King of Crime? I think this is a very good module. Not perfect by the sense of any perfectness. I don't think there's any perfect modules out there, to be honest. And this is definitely not some hidden masterpiece that changes everything as the world we speak here. But it's good. And more important than that, it's very usable and salvageable. That word matters to me more and more with old school adventures. I do not need a module to be brilliant on paper. If it falls apart when you actually try to run it, and I can't tell you how many times that's happened. I like things with energy, structure, variety, and enough support that I could pick it up and feel like the book is actually helping me. And I think King of Crime actually does that. It gives you a city in trouble right away, gives you a villain team that feels colorful without feeling samey. And it gives you sequences of crimes that keeps the pressure on. It gives you maps, notes, troubleshooting, and enough built-in motion that the session does not stall out unless the GM lets it. That is a pretty good package deal going on here. I also think the replay angle helps it stand out too. The fact that the module wants the crimes and villains matchup to shift around a bit gives it more life than you might expect from an older book. And I think that's smart design when they built this one. It means the module is not just a one and done read. It has some room to breathe, some room to surprise, and that's a good selling point, in my opinion. Now, I do think you have to meet it halfway. If you want a wide open superhero sandbox adventure, well, this one's not for you, definitely. If you want every clue, every crime to unfold in a loose, player driven investigation with no rails at all, you will probably need to do some extra work here. This module has a strong spine, and a spine that sometimes shows. But, honestly, for the kind of comic book adventure it is trying to be, I do not see that as a deal breaker at all. I see that as part of the format. This thing wants to feel like a fast-moving comic event. A citywide villain blitz, a public crisis, a hero team scrambling to stop one thing after the next. And when I judge it on those terms, I think it works. So my score for King of Crime, we call it 8 batarangs out of 10. Why did I pick 8? Well, because it has strong pacing, because the villain lineup looks fun, the module feels like it wants to be played, not just read and then thrown around. It has replayability structure, and it has enough support to help a GM with some troubleshooting notes. Why not a 9 or a 10 for this module? Because of the structure is still a little too guided and railroaded for me. Parts of it shows age as well. You may need to smooth some few transitions and lose in a few expectations depending on your group. Again, it's a good module, and I think it hits that rare level where every part really does sing. Still, an 8 is a very good score, though. That means I would absolutely read this again, and I would absolutely mine it for ideas. And it actually has a lot of really good ideas when it comes to this adventure. And I think it's one of the better old school modules out there for DC Heroes. And it kind of reminds us that a good adventure does not need to be complicated. It just needs to have a strong setup, pressure, villains, and enough room for the heroes to make the city feel like it's still worth saving. King of Crime has pretty much all that. So, tell me what you think in the comments at gotham-database.com or write at the podcast at Spotify. I don't know. Tell me what you think. I had an 8 out of 10. What's your module prediction for this? We'll see you next time on the Gotham and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Vince. Good night, everybody.